Many view competition as a harsh measure of self-worth, where victory is excessively celebrated and defeat met with scorn. But when approached wisely, competition transcends the simplistic notion of winners and losers. It becomes a catalyst for holistic development, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Instead of leaderboards determining our value, competition serves as a conduit for honing our character. The true purpose of competition isn't ego gratification, but personal betterment. That is a post that I saw on the gram from Mr. Ben Bergeron, who is a CrossFit coach and also a author of a great book that I read that I highly recommend you guys listen to or read, Chasing Excellence, a story about building the world's fittest athletes. And yeah, a lot of great insights on there with regard to competing at a very high level and some awesome takeaways. A good friend of mine, Dave Cantu, also another shooter, recommended that book. But yeah, I figured I'd start off the podcast that way just because that's going to be kind of the theme of this podcast, considering I just came back from the 2024 Precision Rifle Series finale. But without further ado, welcome to my podcast. If you're new to my podcast, my name is Phillip Velayo. I am a former scout sniper turned competitive shooter and content creator, long-range creative. My passion is teaching. I just happen to teach my hobby, and I just love everything about the art of long-range shooting, the art of precision shooting. I love being able to visually tell the story and craft a story to really, make long-range shooting a lot cooler than, well, I mean, it is cool, but cooler than it seems when you watch some basic videos. So anyways, again, if you're new to my podcast, welcome. Appreciate you being here. If you're a returning listener, listening in the reloading room or on a long drive, make sure you have safe travels. Like I said, coming back from the 2024 PRS finale, this podcast is going to kind of serve off as a lot of housekeeping up front, just because I think there are a lot of people that deserve recognition in my book with regard to, some of the administrators of the PRS, as well as some of the competitors, and just people that, really touched me and my family's life over the weekend. And I just want to, this is a way for me saying thanks. So if you're listening to this and, it's almost kind of like the award ceremony of the PRS where like an hour just drags on of thanking sponsors, which is super important, right? You might want to skip ahead for the next, 15, 20 minutes. But if you want to bear through it, because you might be listening for your name, then hopefully that you're able to endure. But I'll get into the meat and potatoes of some lessons learned from the finale, some takeaways, and really what I plan on doing for the rest of the year. But, to circle back to the beginning of that quote, this is a great way to, especially if you're a competitor and you didn't do as well as you wanted to this past weekend, give yourself some grace in terms of, like take a step back and ask yourself why you compete, what the overall, mission is. And sure, right? Like we all want to be the best. Like the problem is like, dude, there is only one. That's why they call it the GOAT for a reason, right? Greatest of all time. There's only one GOAT in every category. When you think basketball, Michael Jordan, you think football, Tom Brady, right? Quarterbacks, and like right now, the GOAT of precision rifle shooting is Ben Gossett. And congratulations to Ben. He's had a hell of a couple years, and I don't think this is the end for him, So he's our, 2024 Golden Bullet winner. And if you're not a competitive shooter, that name probably doesn't mean anything to you. But, I recognize a feat like that as a lot of someone that has poured their heart and soul into a sport, has sacrificed beyond great lengths his time with his family and something to chase a dream, which obviously was made possible over the past weekend. And, what I love about it is like he is redefining everyone that pushes their limits to, do something great is redefining the standard of precision rifle shooting, and it's great. It's something to look forward to. It's something that, you know, for me that loves competition and as a instructor, as an educator, it's like this is what is capable behind a precision rifle in 2024. Because someone like Ben, someone like Cale Harmon, someone like Dave Preston, someone like Matt Brousseau, Austin Orgain, I could list the name goes on. The way that they're able to drive a precision rifle, like that's capable, like that is what's capable in 2024. And my mission is to try to, show that to my community of snipers, right? That's why I'm here. That's why I'm on this podcast. Hopefully that there's a sniper out there listening to this and not just focusing on like, oh, all Phil talks about is competitive shooting. It's like, it's not about that. But really, God, like I could go on and on about how much competition, and so can probably all of you guys that are listening, those that have competed at a high level or just competed in general. But for me, competition started pretty young. I played hockey for 11 years, from about 5 to about 16. All the whole time that I was in Alaska, and that's kind of when I started building kind of my competitive drive. I didn't play in any of the like all stars for my league. My parents unfortunately couldn't afford a lot of the travel hockey teams and whatnot, so I just stayed local, AHA, Anchorage Hockey Association, and worked all the way up to Bantams. But I got competitive, and it sucked to lose a game or whatever the case might be, and not even just hockey, but academically, I remember wanting to always be the best student that I could be. And I remember actually in 6th grade, I had a teacher, Miss Campbell, and she had this A board. So every time you got like an A on an assignment, you would put that paper up after it was graded up on this board. And at the end of every quarter, she would take the highest boy and highest girl from, who had the most A's or A papers on that board. And she'd count them up. And the most that had for each quarter would go to lunch with her. And I went to lunch all 4 quarters with the other gal that was my arch nemesis, was Antoinette. And yeah, I was a nerd like that. And that carried up until, honestly, my junior year. I was a 4.0 student, and my parents got divorced. I kind of definitely fell off to the wayside, but, my dad was really strict on me about like getting good grades and getting like A's. Like I had to have A's. If I didn't get A's, then I'd be grounded. I'd get, he'd throw some slippers at me, the typical kind of Filipino punishments. So those that are come from my background are probably hopefully laughing at that. And one of this, like I appreciate about my dad now looking back. It's something that I don't require Zoe of, but like I don't know, Zoe gets good grades. She's a straight A student too out here in Cody. And actually it's funny, Cody High School doesn't have a honor roll. I had to actually explain to her what honor roll was the other day when she was asking, because my niece, who lives in Boise now, we're in a group chat, and my mom was kind of bragging to our family group chat that my niece Alea was an honor roll, which is awesome, and Zoe was like, "What's honor roll?" And so I had to explain that to her, so it was pretty funny. But Zoe's a great kid. We just had her parent-teacher conferences last week, and one of the things that, like, getting good grades obviously is important, especially like when we're talking about looking for college and stuff like that. But I didn't want to force that onto her. Like I wanted to just maybe lead by example with the fact that I'm going to school and doing the best that I could for hopefully that to, bleed onto her. And, at the end of the day, all I wanted her to do was work hard in school as hard as she could and be a good student, and so it was refreshing to hear and talk to the teachers during parent teacher conference when I'd ask like, hey, how's Zoe doing? Other than like academically, like how's she doing in class? Is she a disruption? Is she whatever? And they had nothing but great things to say about, how she conducts herself in class and how hard she works. So that was really like, at the end of the night, I almost wanted to, cry just because of how proud I am of her, especially of everything that she's been through in her life. Because she definitely did not have a very picture perfect childhood. I don't think anyone really does, but Zoe's for people that know had a pretty tough upcoming, and selfishly for me, again, there's a lot of things that I wish I could take back, but I can't. And I'm trying to, improve myself as a father to make sure that doesn't happen to my next, my son that's on the way. But more importantly, show to Zoe that like, I recognize that, I failed for the first 10 years to be a part of your life. And like, here I am showing up to be the best version of myself that I can be so that you can be successful, into adulthood, and I think that's what we want as parents at the end of the day. So, that kind of, as I'm looking at my notes here, that kind of spiraled out of control from that quote. But yeah, competition for me is really just elevated even when I became in the Scout Sniper community, right? Because everything was a competition. You were competing amongst your peers to go to sniper school. I've talked about that in length in podcast 4. And, what I found is that it just really, it elevates all aspects of your life, not just, professionally. And one of the things that I love to talk about, and maybe not everyone is like this, but for the most part, I would say a lot of the shooters that I've met, about 90% that get into this sport, because the barrier to entry, unfortunately, to competitive shooting is pretty steep, right? Like, as much as we want to say like, hey, just show up with what you got, right? Once people show up with what they got and they get hooked, they end up working or figuring out means to be able to afford, what this sport is, which is more reloading gear, maybe a higher end rifle, whatever the case might be. So with that, they find the means to be able to feed into this. But for the most part, people that are already doing this at a high level are very good at what they do with their day jobs, right? So like, you're probably at the top of your food chain and whatever the case, whatever, day job that you have. For me, like, this is my day job, like shooting precision rifles, teaching people, creating content around precision rifle shooting. That's like what I do. Versus like, some other competitor might be an electrician, maybe a dentist, maybe maybe a lawyer, a doctor, whatever the case is. Maybe a college graduate, a college student, Allison. But like, you're really good at what you do. And so, naturally it translates to, you don't want to do well, obviously, behind a precision rifle. But hopefully, like, you even if you don't do well at a competition, like, think about all the other aspects of your life that being a competitive shooter has allowed you to improve. Like, for me, being a competitive shooter was like, at first, a way to bridge the gap between what civilian shooters were doing and what we were doing as snipers. What the missing link was of like, God, these people know how to do my job with regard to shooting a rifle way better than I do. And, that evolved into like, okay, well, now how well do I stack up amongst, some of the top shooters in the nation? Now, how do I stay relevant? And, meeting shooters along the way and, seeing what type of fathers they are, seeing what type of human beings they are. Like, if there's one person that I would want to emulate in the sport of precision rifle, it'd be John Kyle. Like, for those that don't know John Kyle is the foundation, or the founder of Foundation Stocks. And he is one of the most down-to-earth human beings that I've ever met. And I absolutely love him and his family. I have nothing but positive interactions. Every time I'm with him. And, especially, I think it was when it was at the KRG Windbreaker match, and that was when Claire met John Kyle, and just how awesome he was to Claire, and being just his normal self, and he really made an impression on Claire over that weekend. And honestly, like because of the sport, like I'm able to be introduced to awesome types of people. And if you're not a competitive shooter, I'm telling you, like, if hopefully if there's one thing you get out of this podcast, it's like, go get into it, because I promise you'll probably find your next best friend or best friends. And there'll be a lot of people that are just going to welcome you with open arms, as long as you're not that guy, AKA you just don't be a douchebag, and you'll be fine. Anyways, so yeah, that is a long rant about competitive shooting, why I love competitive shooting. But, hopefully we can use this, going back to the quote, as just a way to better our lives, better how we are at not just shooting, but being a father, being a significant other, being a boss, or, an employee, being good at your job, figure out ways to elevate ourselves holistically. So, I wanted to talk about some housekeeping stuff. First and foremost, huge shout out to my family over the past weekend that, again, supported me. The weekend was chaotic. I had a 90-minute drive from Meridian to Bliss, Idaho every day. And in the morning, my mom would wake up at 4:30, that poor old woman, and make breakfast for me, Brian, and Claire, because Claire came out both days. And dude, my mom's a champ. And she spoils me like no other. I'm a mama's boy for sure. And I just appreciate that about her. If everyone ever went to, there's some of you that went to my match back in 2000 and I want to say it was 2018 or 2019 when I hosted a Gunworks match. And, she flew out for that to take care of Zoe, because my that week was full of, match prep and stuff like that. And that's the type of woman she is. I absolutely love her. And it's that unconditional love that, I probably won't get elsewhere. And I love you, Mom. If you're listening to this, I know you listen to this because you tell me that you listen to all my podcasts and watch my YouTube videos. So thank you so much for the breakfast and for taking care of the girls. While I was out shooting, but more importantly, thanks for just being the best role model and inspiration that I could ask for. And then shout out to my girls, Zoe and Claire, for supporting me through my competition year of 2024. There's even with 3-4 matches now that I shot, you guys, stuck with me and supported me as I went through the preparation process for it. All the, visits to the range and, the being checked out to make sure that I was as focused as I could be to get ready for a match, and then consistently asking like how I'm doing. And I really appreciate both of you and Claire for sticking out, the 2 days in the cold and barely being able to stay awake throughout the day. She's not a morning person at all, but she was able to power through both 90-minute drives. So it was cool to be able to hang out with my family in Meridian over the weekend, even though the drive was pretty miserable. There's a few of us that did that drive, and I definitely do it again because we had a really nice Airbnb. But it was nice that Airbnb was actually a few minutes away from my sister's house, so it worked out that we were able to see each other every night over the weekend. So next on my list is the series director and owner themselves, Mr. Ken Wheeler and his significant other, Missy Wheeler. Huge thanks to them and their team for an awesome year of the Precision Rifle series. You guys are really, I cannot speak enough about how much you've changed the image of Precision Rifle, the PRS, and I'm excited to see what you guys continue to do with it. That is definitely, the PRS is definitely no small feat. You guys taking it over, and just the brand awareness that you guys are making and the waves that you guys are the changes you guys are making. I mean, I've noticed it. Someone that, feels like has a good pulse on visuals and branding. You guys are killing it. And, it's just a night and day difference from the previous ownership or leadership. So I'm excited to see where you guys take it. And yeah, you guys are just super awesome, an awesome team that I enjoy being able to see when I go out to these events. So, again, shout out to your team for, all the behind the scenes work. Cause again, I know it's not all sexy stuff, but you got an awesome team with you guys. Shout out to Seth Howard and Brian Neese for an awesome match. You guys definitely lived up to my standard of one of the best match directors, some of the best match directors in the nation. I thought your full course of fire was well balanced. It was challenging, and it was a finale match, between the different target sequences, between target sizes, the conditions on day one, even though that, at least for the stages that I shot, I thought the course of fire was fair on both days, regardless of the conditions that we had on either day. And I think even regardless where you started. So, I definitely appreciate you living up to the hype of being some of the best match directors, in my opinion. And yeah, just the overall course of fire that you guys laid out and all the hard work that you guys put, like some of the where the steel targets were at. Like, I've set up a match before, and I know how it is to be able to want to set a target out or in the location that's cool because of the shooting angle or the winds. And, I would say, I think everyone would agree, the only shortcoming is that, we had probably a lot more target failures than the matchers would want to, but that's just the nature of the beast in terms of the terrain that you guys had set the targets at. The only slight inconvenience, the fact that everyone's off the weekend, is that we shot a little later than we wanted to. But huge shout out to the hard work you guys put into that match, guys. Then followed up by the ROs. You guys are the true MVPs for the match. You guys showing up and in the cold, making sure that we're running a safe event, but more importantly, dedicating your guys' weekends to, watch us shoot and make sure that, we are running a smooth event. Honestly, we couldn't be able to do something like this without you guys. So shout out to any of the ROs or any RO that goes out of their way, spends a weekend to, sacrifice and be with us shooters while we get to have fun. You guys are awesome. And with that, thanks to all the ROs that would take the time to say thanks with regard to my content or introduce yourselves, as well as everyone else that came up and, introduced themselves to me, whether you're another shooter as well. And I'm really glad you guys are enjoying the style of content, in terms of the format, especially with this podcast of like, hey, not only do I want to talk about precision rifle stuff, but like, I want to talk about, other stuff that, has changed my life or inspired me to, do what I'm doing now, and just share my journey with you guys. And hopefully, you guys find value with that, and take it with your own life, see how you can apply it with your own journey as well, in this crazy thing that we call life. So, it motivates me to continue to stick with the format, do more content, and push out, again, as much as I can handle. With that being said, shout out to Dakota, who's going to edit this podcast, who's been helping me turn and burn a lot of content lately. It's a lot to try to keep up with the quality that we want, with the vision that we want. I've definitely come a long way from just regular my phone sitting in a reloading room. But I enjoy it. I enjoy the process of setting things up, but Dakota's been killing it for me, with doing a lot of behind the scenes editing these podcasts and my Whiteboard Wednesdays. And so, huge shout out to him. So give him a follow, if you need any, content. I know he's always looking for side work, so hit him up if you're a creative looking to edit some videos. But thanks, Dakota. Yeah, a shout out to Brian. So my best friend Brian, who also recorded or filmed us for the Gap Grind, came out again to grab some behind the scenes for me, as well as do some match coverage event for the PRS. And Brian and I, again, Brian's got a really good creative eye. Him and I actually worked on a non-shooting related project for a shooter a couple weeks ago out in Orange County, one of our clients, and he's an NRL hunter shooter, but him and I worked seamlessly together, which was awesome. But he's, because he, spent some time behind a precision rifle, he has the aesthetic look that kind of like that I have, that I feel like is missing in the sport. And so I'm excited to see how he's able to bring, again, the sport to life with the video, the visuals that he captured over the weekend. And, he did both photos and videos. So yeah, I'm excited to see what he cuts up. That video is probably going to live, or is going to live, on the PRS YouTube. So yeah, huge shout out to Brian for making the trek from Southern California to Boise to hang out with us over that week. It was a long, long day, because every morning, as soon as we wake up, pack our camera gear up, head over to the match, and then as soon as we got back, dump all of our footage. I mean, every night starting Friday night, we wouldn't go to bed till 11:30, 12 o'clock after just making sure all the camera gear was good to go. So it was definitely a long 3 days for us. Now I want to shout out to Squad 5. You guys were awesome. I was fortunate enough to kind of work out a deal with Ken to get squatted in the bigger squad, or in the where the top guys out, because based off the video that we want to create, that Brian and I want to create, we want to highlight some of the top shooters, because that's kind of what the finale is about. So he stuck me in Squad 5, and I've shot with most of everyone that was in Squad 5, guys like Corey Vogus, Rusty Ulmer, Tate Streeter, which I'll circle back around those names, but the whole squad was great. And at the end of the day, like, what's cool about this sport, and I think this is something that has been already kind of indoctrinated in, is like we're all sharing win calls or game plans. Like, even though, yeah, it is an individual sport, and some of you guys, that don't compete, you're like, that you look at it like, you guys are just sharing win calls anyways. Sure, we are. But when it comes time to, like, when that buzzer hits or that time hits, like, the person that's on the clock is pressing every shot. Like, we're not pressing it for him. So ultimately, their ability to, shoot under pressure, is obviously what's going to separate the shooter stack. But up until that point, like, collectively, we're like, because we all want each other to win. Like, and that's what's awesome about, the PRS sport. Like, even though we're all competing against each other, we all want to see each other do well. And, we're sharing gear, right? Rusty let me borrow his plate bag for a couple of the tripod rear stages. Yeah. And, I got to give a real quick shout out to Ted. So Ted shot in front of me, and typically, like, just the way that it works is you're a win for somebody. And, Ted was an awesome win dummy. I hate to say that, win, but, like, win dummy, like, he shot in front of me every single time. And unfortunately, Ted had some gun issues, which, like, I can relate to. I've had gun issues, but the way that he handled it was awesome. He, tried to fix it mid-match and was kind of figured out a solution, but then it started to run away from it again. But, like, this is how, one of the other competitors in our squad, I think his name was Rowdy, gave Ted his rifle to shoot to finish off the match. Like, how awesome is that, right? Like, you're giving your rifle to another competitor shooter like that. And again, I'm not surprised, because that's just how awesome the sport is. But Ted did an awesome job, and I appreciate him. He's actually funny enough. He said he won one of our when I was with Modern Day Cyber, one of my positional masterclass that I did while I was with them, and I'm glad that and I can kind of see it when I was watching him shoot. So like when he'd come off the stage, like I trusted whatever call that he gave because he was fundamentally sound. Because sometimes, I have shooters in front of me that are like, I don't want to hear what you have to say, but everything that he had said, for the most part, was right on the money, which I'll get into here shortly. But shout out to Tate Streeter. If you don't know who Tate Streeter is, Tate is the owner of Impact Actions, and Tate is probably one of the most down to earth human beings. I enjoy watching him. He's a great shooter, great competitive shooter. I've squatted. I've like always intimidated when I shoot with him because he's just so solid, and he's always a consistently top finisher, even if he says he's in retirement. But it's cool to see guys like Tate out there, because it's like, he arguably, right, has one of the best actions on the market. This is coming from somebody that runs a Lone Peak. I do have an Impact. It's actually the Impact that I have is the one that I won in 2018. It's a great action. And honestly, you can't go wrong in 2024 with 3 action companies that we'll always talk about. Because you guys always ask me that question all the time. It's like, hey, what action should I get? You're never going to go wrong with an Impact, a Lone Peak, or a Defiance. And the reason why I always promote those 3 is, number one, because I have all 3. But those are the 3 that I always consistently see at these matches. Brian and Mike Anderson, I've got a great relationship with those guys. They make a phenomenal action. I love my Lone Peaks. Again, I'm this like, at this point, it's like Ford, Chevy, Dodge. I've got a few Defiances. I've got 3 Defiances that are great actions. I know they've got some new ownership, but got a really great relationship with Chad, their GM, and a lot of great shooters run them. Short Action Customs, their action is essentially branded Defiance with short action cut Mark Gordon specifications. I have a couple of those were one of my first original actions, but I'm always going to lean towards supporting the people that are giving back to the sport. And when you go to these matches, you hear about the rifles that these companies are donating back into the sport, back to range officers. Like, who wouldn't want to support that? So that's just my opinion. That's why I always try to support those 3. So hopefully, to answer your question, like which action should I get? You're never going to go wrong with either of those 3. I just figure out like who's in stock. Shout out to my boy Corey, Team Red. Corey is an Austin. So Corey and I met, I think, through the gram, but Corey actually RO'd the first finale that I went to, 2018, the one that I won, and he RO'd the hardest stage of the match, in my opinion, which was, I think it was like it was the first 10 position, 1 target stages that I had ever shot. And leading up to that stage, I was clean, and that was literally my second to last stage. The last stage that I shot was a breeze. But the second to last one, which is the one that Corey was on, Corey and Jesse were on, and they're both from Texas, RO'd that stage. And I remember him and I were, messaging each other through the gram at that point. I cleaned his stage, cleaned the next stage, and won the finale. But him and I, created a pretty awesome relationship. He's a PT down in Texas area, just outside of Austin. But I'd fly down and we'd shoot the Texas matches together. And he's really good friends with my good friends, the Grimes. But awesome human being. Cannot speak enough about Corey. And then last but not least, I want to talk about Mr. Rusty Ulmer. So if you've been living under a rock, Rusty Ulmer is that dentist that I always talk about that just whomps on my ass all the time. And he did, again, this match, just straight up crush me. I mean, I wouldn't say crush me because I was a couple places behind him, but just watching him shoot. I mean, this is somebody that is a dentist. He retired as a dentist, I think he said 15 years ago. He's 64 years old, but he moves like he's my age. Rusty is a phenomenal shooter. He's a great ambassador to the sport. I picked his brain a little bit about, what his, process of calling wind is, because not only is a good PRS shooter, but he's like one of the best NRL hunter shooters, like straight up intuition. I mean, he's a hunter by trade, so go figure. But when I think of NRL hunter goats, I think of like Matt Alwine and Rusty Ulmer. And Rusty is a phenomenal shooter. I hope to continue to shoot like he does at his age, X amount of years from now. So, Rusty is that dentist that just does work and knows how to run a precision rifle. Again, shout out to all the winners and competitive shooters. If you got an invite to the finale, be proud of yourself, right? Like I always tell people that those that compete are truly in the top 1%, even 0.1% of top shooters in the nation. So the fact that you got an invite to the finale, you're like 0.1% of, the 1%. And I say that because I've seen shooters from all skill levels. And typically my shooters, even if they're mid-pack, if they've got any kind of competition experience, they typically would get high shooter from the classes that I would teach, whether it's a 2-day, 3-day, or a 4-day. And, it just goes to show that, competition breeds just those great shooters. And, so to be proud of that accomplishment, but a really huge shout out to Ben, like I talked about at the beginning of, Ben Gossett. Congratulations on your golden bullet. I know it was a long journey. I have no idea what you're feeling because I don't have a golden bullet, but I can only imagine the sacrifices. Congratulations to Matt Alwine for second place with a Savage. That is insane. Matt knows how to run a gun. He's been killing it in the NRL Hunter, but I mean, just the fact, like, I know I talk smack on Savages all the time, but I will say they are some of the, if not the most accurate rifles out of the box on the market, even though I'm not a fan of their action. But it goes to show that it doesn't really matter how smooth you can run an action. If you have a good shooting rifle or barrel, and you know exactly how to press the trigger, you're going to win or do well. So, and then shout out to Cale Harmon, last year's Golden Bullet winner, another sniper. Cale is an awesome ambassador, in my opinion, to the sport and to our community as snipers. Him and I have been able to, talk over the last couple of years, and it's been cool to see his journey from just a regular shooter to now a top level competitor and consistent top level competitor. But what really made an impression about me with Cale is during the award ceremony, he walked up to Claire and asked her how she was doing with pregnancy. He's a father himself, and just was able to not talk about shooting with me or with my girlfriend, and it was just such a cool experience to watch that. It just shows the type of person that Cale is, and I'm proud to call him a friend, and he's just not only a great ambassador to our competitive shooting sport, but to the sniper community as a whole. Because again, he is a Army AMU shooter, former Marine that went over to the Army side and now does that. And so Cale, if you're listening to this, I know you didn't get the results that you wanted to this year, but you're continuing to etch your name in the history books for our sport. So thanks for all you do for our community. And then I just got to give a shout out to Dave Preston, man. Dave is a big inspiration of mine. He, he's been shooting a lot longer than I have. He was one of the, kind of the most consistent shooters as I was coming up. That was like, man, if I can keep up with Dave. But the fact that he's been doing this for so long and consistently always placing at the top, not like this burnout where it's just that person used to be really good, but now Dave is just always crushing it. And so it was cool to see him up at the top doing well. And yeah, hopefully I'll be able to shoot as calm, cool, and collective as Dave one day. But yeah, very long-winded list of thanks. There's one more group that I give a shout out to because they're super important to me. But got to give a shout out to the UK boys, Mr. Andy, James, and Trez. If you guys are unfamiliar with them, they are the essentially series directors of the PRS in the UK. They do a lot of great for the sport, and it's super cool. So I was fortunate enough to head out there a couple years ago, or it was last year, to do a series of classes, and I had such a great time with them. We spent 2 weeks together, and they are just amazing human beings. And I brought Claire out, and like honestly, they're like my UK brothers, and what I appreciate about them is how like they just looked after Claire all weekend. They treat her like a little sister, and they're just phenomenal human beings. So, you know, I know they've recently just started doing like introductory level classes. So if you're in the UK listening to this and you're not a competitive shooter, or you are a competitive shooter wanting to, you know, hit a reset, like go get a class from them. And, you know, and if you're listening to this, like you don't need permission from anybody to teach a class, right? Like if you're passionate about teaching, or if you're passionate about wanting to get back to your sport and in the form of holding a class and doing that, go do it. Right? There's no one out there that like holds the, you know, keys to introductory or whatever level classes, right? So if you're in the Europe area and you're wanting to get into precision rifle competitive shooting, or like getting into precision rifle shooting, hit them up. I'm sure they're going to take care of you. And it was cool to hear them talk about their first few classes and how they were inspired to see what I see as a teacher of like the light bulbs and stuff like that. But ultimately also too, like, you know, being an instructor just makes you that much more locked on as a shooter, right? Because now you're really peeling back the layers of like, oh, is this what I do? And how do I communicate that? How do I communicate that to this shooter? So shout out to those boys on the other side of the pond. I love you guys. Thanks for all you do for me and my family. And James, thanks for the squashies. I'll try to do better at picking up my phone. Okay, that's all for the shout outs. I think there might be a couple that roll in later on. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of what I wanted to talk about with this podcast. I want to talk about my sustainments, my improvements, and then obviously kind of what's next after the finale. So we'll start with my sustainments. My sustainments this year that I've wrote down, and I had to think like long and hard about this because I didn't want to, you know, like, oh, fundamentally I was doing okay. Like I wanted to think about like, I had to sit and figure out like what I felt like went right for me this finale versus the two finales ago, or the last two finales where I didn't do as well as I had wanted to. But my first sustain that I have is my rifle preparation. So again, I brought a 6.5 Creedmoor running 153 A-tips. And unlike before, I shot like 300 rounds of those 153 A-tips before the match, not including, you know, the Hornady PRC and the practice leading up to that. Like literally once I screwed that barrel back on from the gap grind, I shot about 300 rounds out of that barrel to make sure the load that I was going to use and the speed that I was going to use was consistent throughout that whole time. And I was also testing to see like, okay, well, if I take it to this far, like how much do I need to clean it before it starts to fall apart? And, you know, and I'm talking like going from a half minute group to like 0.6. Like if it wasn't in the case of like shooting at the finale, like I'd be like, you're not going to shoot the difference, right? Like you've probably heard me say that, like it doesn't matter. But today, when it comes to competing at the PRS finale, like you want that 0.5 gun or 0.4 gun, right? Because like I'm in the mindset in the camp of like, I'm going to try to improve all of my processes that I can by 1%. So even though it's not a big jump going from 0.6 to 0.5, like I'm going to try to do the best I can to get that difference, because now I'm improving that process by 1%, my spreads by 1%, my fundamentals by 1%. And got this from Atomic Habits. If you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. It's called the aggregate of marginal gains. And I try to apply that to, my competition mindset. Sure. Again, if you are, an enthusiast that, maybe is not shooting 1 MOA targets all the way out, and, you're just shooting 2 MOA targets out to like 700 because that's what your range has. You're not trying to get the nitty gritty. Honestly, stuff a load in there, figure out a velocity, and for the most part, you're going to be okay. But if you are trying to compete at a high level, you want to try to find every chance you can get to take that extra step or advantage, as long as it makes sense, to improve your processes by 1%. That is what is going to separate you from that mid-pack, right, area. So, yeah, rifle prep. I'm guilty of going to a match because, I'm not sticking with a bullet combination. And that's one thing that I think I talked about in this previous episode, is my goal this year was to stick with one cartridge and bullet combination, which was a 6.5-47 running 140 ELDMs. Lasted one match. Excuse me, 2 matches. I shot that for the Blue Ridge match, which is like second this year, and then the gap grind. But this year, because I knew the conditions based off of the fact that we're shooting it around the Snake River, I'd shot not that same exact venue, but a similar venue before. I knew that I would probably be beneficial with a heavy bullet. I decided to shoot the 153s. But again, before in the previous finales, which in 2022, when I shot at K&M, I ran a 6.5-47 run of 135 A-tips. Try not to make any excuses, but my prep for that, because I was actually, a hunting season for me. I was actually helping my buddy Michael, my one of my best friends out here, on his elk hunt, and I didn't really do any load development. I just stuffed the same exact recipe that I had shot at the Alpha Munitions Nut Crusher, but like I wasn't confident in that rifle at all when I got to the finale. Then, and it showed. I ended up in like 200th place or something like that. And then fast forward to 2023, I decided, let's run a 647 with 110 A-tips, a load that I wasn't really familiar with, and try to chase the speeds or find the speed that there's a technically note at. It looked good going into, load development, only shooting maybe like, again, 40 to 50 rounds before the match, all on my belly, just doing load development and figuring out which one, shoots the best, and be like, okay, I'm going to stick with this charge weight, this sitting depth, and run with it. And then again, not feeling confident in that rifle because, my bullets are not going where my reticle is pointed, even with a solid shooting position. And I do the best I can to not, because I always want to assume that when I make a bad shot, it's me, right? But I'll tell you, over this weekend, with this combo, 6.5 Creedmoors, 153s, and how confident with that rifle I was, my bullet went exactly where my reticle was pointing every single time. It's probably one of the best shooting combinations that I've shot in the longest time, especially for a finale. And so, yeah, I would say my sustainment this year, or for this match, was definitely rifle prep. Out of the 29 shots I dropped, I could probably bet 50% was at least over bearing wind calls, or I'd say about 40% over bearing wind calls. 10% was like not enough wind, but the other 50% was definitely, bad trigger presses or mental errors. So yeah, my advice for you guys is you know, unless you guys want to dabble around like I do because you enjoy messing around with other cartridges, like stick to one bullet in rifle combo, and figure out what works, and just know that round like the back of your hand. Because really that's going to be a lot better than trying to gain an extra few points with BC or whatever the case is. So I'll say that. And then just the basic, stuff. Like one thing that I've also taken for granted was not checking my action screws, or making sure my scope was, secured, because eventually over time it loosens up. I've seen that where, day one after the match, I'm like, I should try to tighten everything. And then I realized a couple of my top action scope ring screws are not tight. And so, oh crap. So now I'm checking my zero on the second day, and yeah. So, and then just, understanding what your threshold is with regard to cleaning. I'll just leave it at that. So the second sustainment that I have for me is not falling apart after a bad stage, keeping my composure. I am so guilty, especially after last year. I tell this to Claire, like the one saving grace that for me being at the 2023 PRS finale was the fact that Claire was there. But like after like the third or fourth stage and just not shooting anywhere near what I felt was my potential, I just wanted to leave. And, because it happens, right? Like, you get there and, mentally you're like, okay, I think everything's good. And, you bomb a stage or you get like a 2 and you're like, well, there goes the match. Like not even just goes the match, like there goes any chance of me placing in any type of like high, high marker. And so I was really proud of myself of like, even if after having a bad stage, which I had a couple bad stages, which was a rocks. Well, they were all rock stages, but there was a six position 2 target stage with a bobcat and a rock chuck, which I got a 8 on, dropped 4 points there. But at the end of the day one, I shot the long bomb stage, and I actually got hit with that crazy weather system that came in, where that's a whole nother story in itself. I'm just proud of myself that I didn't fall apart after a bad stage. So keeping your composure the best that you can and trying to treat every stage as if it's the first stage of the day is my biggest advice to you competitors that are trying to compete at a high level, is treat every stage as if it's the first stage of the day. Without the jittery part, but just being as focused as you can, of like going through your processes of like, okay, hey, everyone has a checklist of like, okay, once I get my stage brief from the RO, this is the cycle of operations that I go through in order to make sure all my checks and balances are good to go before I start the stage, right? Because really, realistically, that is also what separates you, is how much preparation you're doing in before the actual execution of the stage. Okay. So yeah, I can dive into what my processes are in a whole nother podcast, because it's a rabbit hole in itself. But everyone has their process. So sticking to that process consistently every single time is gonna make you successful. And then the third one for me was maintaining target order sequence. So in this match, there was a lot of different target sequence orders, which was awesome. Right, it really was a mental game. So it was a stressor of, okay, you're going to shoot this left to right, then right to left, near to far, far to near. You're going to change rocks. You're going to shoot near, far, near, change rocks, shoot the reverse order, or near, near, far, something crazy like that, right? There's only like 1 or 2, maybe like 3 simple stages of like near, far, 2 rounds per target, or 10 positions, 1 target, right? A lot of it was crazy shooting sequences, which is good. It allows you to think. That's what the match directors are wanting you to do. So I'm glad that even despite having some hiccups mid-stage, whether because it's a bad wind call or I made a mental error, I was able to maintain my target order sequence, because I saw that a lot with competitors, and I see it a lot with competitors, is you go up to a stage and no one anticipates missing, right? Like you don't go up to a stage and you're like, oh, I'm going to miss this first shot, right? But sometimes when it does happen, and especially if you don't see where that bullet goes, like literally everyone checks out. Like, I shouldn't say everyone, a lot of shooters will check out. And you guys are probably listening to this. There's some of you who are like, oh man, that's me. Of like, now that I don't know where my bullet is at, my next focus is like, okay, I need to figure out where my bullets are going so that I can try to, salvage whatever the stage that I have left. Oh, but now what target am I shooting? Right? Because now I'm shooting this crazy order, right? So this is why like top level competitors, guys like Nick Godarzi, Austin Bushman, Austin Orgain, all these guys, like they have a process for when shit falls apart mid stage. They have a process of getting back to target. Tate Streeter, I was watching him shoot stage 20, and stage 20 was crazy. It was awesome. You shot like pretty much 180 degrees. So you started off with a right wind call, you move completely 180 off on this turntable, and then you shoot with a left wind. And I think he had missed like 2 shots in a row, went to the third target. Before he took his shot, he stopped, looked up at a wind flag, got back on the gun, and took his wind call. And I talked about this before, and then shot and then impacted. Right. And that is the stuff that I'm talking about, of like what top level competitors are able to do is like get out of that tunnel vision of like going through their processes and figure out like, okay, hey, I need to fix something so that, I can at least do something different. So that was super cool to watch Tate do. But yeah, try to have a process. So, how do you train for that? Like you train for that by intentionally screwing something up when you're practicing. Maybe it is starting the stage and knowing that there's wind and holding straight up. So meaning that like I know there's wind there, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot this 5 target sequence, but I'm only going to get 5 out of 10 because I'm going to hold center on every single one of my shots, knowing that I have to correct back on target on the second shot. Right. And so you're building in these processes of, versus like, oh, I'm just going to wait until I shoot a match before I work on this because, I don't ever need to worry about falling apart. It's going to happen. People are going to fall apart on the stage. So this is how I train for it. Okay. So those are some of my sustains of what I'm proud of myself after kind of peeling back the layers of like, what I felt like I did well on this match. Let's talk about my improvements. Very first thing I have here is wind calls. We can always get better at wind calls, but what I mean by that is I still struggled with calling too much wind. Again, out of the say if I had 100% of my wind calls were misses, most of them were on the pro side, say like 80% were on the pro side, and then, the 20% were on the amateur side. So I still struggled with holding too much wind. This goes back to like, if I were to stuck to just one bullet rifle combination throughout the year, I could have learned that round. I feel like I'm the best with my wind call combo with a 6.5 140 ELDM, because that round for me is like a 175 SMK with 308, just because I've shot it so many times out of both the 6.5 47 and a 6.5 Creedmoor. But wind calls, I think we can always work on wind calls. And again, even though I had Ted in front of me, at the end of the day, when it came time to making my own wind call at the stage, I would take whatever he gave me, I'd have it in the back of my head, but when I made and I pressed my shot, it ultimately was like my decision on making that wind hold. And I will say from experience that, and a lot of you guys can agree with me, is that if you use that, like if you decide to use somebody else's wind call, right? Like let's say that the person went and was like, hey, I was holding 3/10 on target 1, 4/10. You will be more upset if you missed with someone else's wind call than if you missed with your own wind call. All right. So let that sink in for a little bit. You will be more upset if you miss with someone else's wind call than your own wind call. Okay. So, let's say that you wanted to start with 4/10, but the person in front of you was like, oh, I only needed 3. And you're like, okay, I'm going to use 3, and you miss, and you're like, I should just use 4. Versus if you were to have been used 4, missed, and it was really 3, you're not going to be as mad, in my opinion. That being said, at sniper school, when I taught at sniper school, I would always tell my students that at the end of the day, when it comes time to your score and shooting the qualification, whether you believe your spotter or not, because at sniper school, like you would shoot and spot for each other. So first relay would go up, or first shooter would go up, and then they switch shooters. And sometimes you get paired with a bad spotter or a bad observer. But we would tell the shooters, like at the end of the day, like it's your wind call. It's your bullet. You put your name on it. So whether you believe your observer or not, it's up to you. And I feel the same thing with competition. So anyways, we can always improve on wind calls. Jittery. I was a lot more jittery. I was more jittery than I was typically. And I think that had to do with the fact that I was shooting a lot better than I anticipated going into the match. I started off the first 5 stages, only dropping 2 shots. And then I got to the PRS barricade. And if you guys watched my whiteboard Wednesday, you saw I dropped 2 points there, which again, overconfidence, not focusing on my processes. But yeah, I was jittery, and I started becoming outcome focused versus process focused. And what I mean by that is I was just focusing on, hey, I need to clean this stage, right? Because now the mental pressure of doing well is getting to me. And it's like, oh, instead of maybe a top 50 finish, I could potentially be in the top 25 or even top 10. But I let that creep into my head, and this is where that mental game is super important. But it's like, I know better. I just need to focus on the process. Ground my bag, ground my rifle, find my target, square up, establish my rifle to shoulder connection, find my target, close my bolt, check my cant, make my wind call, breathe, relax, reticle, squeeze, recover, follow through, observe where that bullet goes, run my bolt, make my correction, and at that point, it's a wash, rinse, repeat. Relax, breathe, easy press. And that's it. But instead, in my head, it was like, I need to make this impact. And I caught myself after that stage because I think I ended up doing well. But it happens, right? And that is why, I think one thing I want to look at better is improving my mental processes or my mental game, and I'm trying to figure out how to do that without wanting to shoot more matches, right? Because I don't think that's the answer. I don't think shooting more matches is the answer to try to improve your mental process. There's other ways of doing that. And when I figure that out, I will let you guys know. And if you guys have figured out, please let me know in the comments of like how you figured out how to improve your mental process at a match if you're not shooting 20 matches a year. So the next thing I want to improve on is my pre-shot routine / mental errors. I had 2 of them over the match. The first mental error I had was a tree stage. It was, for me, the second to last stage of the match. And at this point, I think that I was kind of like getting lazy, right? It's been a long day. It was already, I think, like 4:30 or 5. And, I got just caught slipping. And essentially the course of fire was take up one position, engage target 1, move to position number 2, engage target 1 with 1 round. So move to position 1, shoot target 1 with 1 round. Move to position 2, target 1 with 1 round, target 2 with 2 rounds. Move to position 3, target 1 with 1 round, target 2 with 2 rounds, target 3 with 3 rounds. Total 10 rounds. But I knew that because it was a multi-target stage, positions were pretty easy. I would just tape my turret and I would just double checking to make sure. So I was kind of doing my like pre-shot routine of like double checking. But what happened was because I use a masking tape, like an orange masking tape, I'm not a cool kid and I don't have that like white tape over my turret that also reflects your mills. So once I tape my turret with masking tape, like I can't see my mills. So I was just making sure that I tape my turret correctly with like, okay, hey, target 1 is, 1.9, target 2 is 3.1, whatever the case might be. And I was just going back and forth, counting off from whatever my last visible number was. And so I left target 2 on my dope when I started the stage. And again, I should have checked this I usually check this when in the part where the shooter's like, or the RO's like, hey, shooter, do you understand the course of fire? I'll double check my turrets one last time, make sure my wind is dialed where I want to, my parallax, my magnification. I literally stop from top to bottom of like elevation, parallax, windage, magnification, trigger cams on. Okay. That's at least my processes. And so I messed up and didn't check that. And so I got to that first position, took my shot, and I was like, I'm mil high. And I'm like, what the heck? So I moved to position 2. But this is why I go back to like, I'm proud of myself for maintaining target order sequence, because I see a lot of shooters when they miss so extreme like that, they fall apart and they start screwing up their shooting order. But because I was able to realize, okay, hey, I messed up. I need to come back to target number 1, right? Falling back to just, hey, what is the shooting order, right? Shooting target 1 with 1 round, target 2 with 2 rounds is now my next shooting order. Make sure you're on the right dope, idiot. So it happens. Corey. So after stage 11 for us, which was the long bomb stage, which was like 1,100 yard target, some of us had a dial over 10 mils. And when you do that, you now are on the second rev. And so it's the beginning of stage 12, which is now day 2 for us, stage 1. Now the first target's like 300 yards. Sometimes shooters, which Corey did, forget to float back to 0. And he ends up being a rev off when engaging that next stage. So I cannot stress enough post-fire checks. Even if you're not a competitive shooter, it's important, because I see I know a lot of shooters that have gone to the range, shot like the furthest target they can, and then come back the next day or week and realize that they effed up and they can't even, they're all over the map, or can't even get out of paper at 100 yards. And then they call their gun manufacturer and say that their gun's all jacked up, when really they just left their turret a whole rev off. So anyways, post-shot checks are super important. I always try to go back to 0-0 on elevation and windage, and leave my magnification right around 10 power. So my second mental error that I had was not loading enough rounds in my magazine. And so this was the cattle gate stage. This is a day 2. This is the cattle gate, 6 positions. Start position number 1, engage near target with 2 rounds, move to position 2, engage far target with 2 rounds, and just go back and forth from 6 different positions. And I was trying to get cute with my GoPro, because I had packed it. I wanted to use it at least once. And so I try to do like a hard mount where I get just a different shot type. And, that's at least my excuse. Excuses are like hassles. And anyways, I don't feel like, a lot of people ask, like, does trigger cam stuff, like, does it ever mess you up in recording? Like, I don't think it does. Honestly, it's so built into my routine now that, I enjoy it. It keeps me out of my head, I think. But like, I go back to like being a sniper. It's like, shooting is truly only 1% of what you've got going on. Like when you're a sniper and you're doing your job correctly, like you're managing the battlefield, you're talking to your team, you're managing your team, you're calling supporting arms, you're talking to the supported unit commander, whoever you're supporting. Like you've got all these moving parts that like you can't consider them distractions. They're all a part of the mission, And when it comes time to shoot and pull the trigger, like you need to be on point. You don't tell me that you were distracted because you had to call the CO or you got to call the commander and let them know, or like, you couldn't get calm up. Like that's just BS to me. So that's how I look at it. Maybe this is why I won't ever be a top competitor. But I'm close to winning a match with the trigger cam. I got second earlier this year. It's one of my goals. And then maybe I can give it up. But I enjoy creating content because it brings the sport to life a little bit. So anyways, off my other soapbox. So forgot to load a mag of 12 rounds or 11 rounds at least. I'm not a cool kid. I don't have the Gray Ops, the new AW magazine that he has that holds 12 rounds. So I still am using the AW mags where I can only load 11, and then I pull from, and I've never felt like I've been hindered for that from 12 round stages. Even with the other 12 round stages that I shot, I was doing that and did fine. So I got to position number 5, shot that, went to position number 6, went to close my bolt, realized that I was empty, threw the first round in, hit my 11th round, and then timed out for my 12. So, that's just the stuff that the top level guys are not doing, right? Like when you're winning a match, you're not making these mental errors. The last thing that I have here is improvements is just like basic fundamentals, after like, again, remembering some of the shots that I broke, bad wobble zones and bad trigger presses. Like there was a handful, if not 50%, at least 50% win, 50% bad presses, right? Or even like maybe a 40-60 split. Where I look at some of my positions, after reviewing some of my footage, and I realize, why did I take up that position? And there's a couple times, and I'll talk about this, especially when shooting rocks. I think I talked about this in a previous episode, but like, one of the things about like shooting natural terrain is like, sometimes you can't get squared behind the rifle because, based off of how the elevation or the terrain lays, or maybe there's another rock in the way, whatever the case is, or maybe you have to pan. And so there's a couple times that I was, taking a position. I was trying to maximize my surface area contact, which, at that point sacrifices my ability to square up behind the rifle. But nevertheless, there's workarounds. I know that there's workarounds to be able to get the stability that I need to press a good shot. And I knew that I wasn't taking that extra time to do that. And I was pressing, when my wobble zone was outside of the target, as you guys saw, if you guys watched my earlier Whiteboard Wednesday from this week, comparing the PRS skill stage, making sure that I am pressing every shot as fundamentally sound as I possibly can is the goal. It doesn't always happen, right? But, in order to get to that top level, like you have to press every shot as clean as you can possibly make it. And so going back to the drawing board is going to be fun to make sure that, I can clean those up, those extra few shots up with, just the basic fundamentals of precision marksmanship. So that is my improvements in sustains. Again, sustains, rifle prep, not falling apart after a bad stage, maintaining target order sequence, and then followed by some improvements, wind calls, jittery, pre-shot routine, mental errors, base fundamentals. So this is something that I recommend you guys do after a match, or after, not even, if you're not a competitive shooter. I know this podcast right now is aiming toward competitive shooters because I am a competitor. I just came out of the PRS finale, so it's relevant to me. But this still applies to you as a just regular enthusiast. If you're coming out of training practice, write down some sustains, some improvements, and I promise you it will help you, focus on the next time you're training to improve your processes. But I got this from the late gunnery sergeant, or at the time he's my gunnery sergeant, and he was a mass sergeant, but Andrew Sullivan, a sniper, my mentor, big brother. He passed away a few years ago, but we'd come back from a mission, and he would ask us, hey, give me 3 sustainments and 3 improvements. And that was, pretty much how he conducted his debriefs. Short, simple, to the point. It didn't drag on any more than it needed to, and it was beautiful. And, I owe a lot to being a sniper and sniper instructor to that man. So, Andy, if you're listening to this in the afterlife, I love you, man, and I miss you dearly. So, okay, what's next? What's next for me? I typically don't have an off season with regard to like shooting a rifle, even though I take a few weeks off, because I do this for a living professionally. Like, I touch a rifle at least once a week, whether it's cleaning it, reassembling it, whatever the case might be. But, I think there is definitely going to be a off season for competition. So with that being said, I'll probably take the time to, refit a few different barrels, get them respun up, send a few actions over to Short Action Customs. And actually next year, I want to try the 25-47 and a dasher. I'm always late to the party. A lot of the guys in my squad had 25s. Andy Simpson, my friend from the UK, he was running a 25 Creedmoor, and that thing shot like, he didn't do well on day 1, but day 2, he was on fire. He could not miss. And he was running a 25 Creedmoors, those 134 ELDMs. He was on fire. So I'm excited to try a 25. I heard good things about 25-47, as I'm a big fan of the 47 cartridge. So that's something I want to try out. And then a dasher, that's 1.6mm I have not played with. I've played with the 6 Creed, shot that for the longest time. It's a great cartridge. I just don't really like the barrel life. I tried the 6GT for a little bit when it first came out. I just didn't have the right luck with it, with the barrel that I had. But I got a bunch of brass. And then the 647, another great cartridge. And then 6BRA. I did really good one season using a 6BRA, but I felt those was like a little too slow for my shooting style, so I drifted away from that. But I'm seeing if the dasher is all that it's hyped up to be, and that's my style. Like I don't like to just regurgitate what other people are using and just be like, when somebody asks me, like when you guys genuinely ask me a question, like I want to try to speak from experience, not like this he said, she said bullshit. Like I want to be able to, list out the pros and cons based off what I experienced, based off of like, okay, hey, these are what the numbers are, but this is like the practical reality of like what you're shooting, if you're choosing this cartridge over that cartridge, whatever it is. There's a lot of instructors out there that, again, just regurgitate, and they want to say that they're relevant, but they're really not, because they're just regurgitating what other people are doing, right? Or they're reading numbers off of a ballistic solver, which anybody can do that nowadays, right? But there's actual practical, things that a ballistic solver cannot tell you, like your ability to manage recoil or your dwell time or your ability to react, your ability to watch trace. Like those are the things that you can't get from a ballistic solver, that by actually applying, or shooting these specific cartridges that you can actually get, in my humble opinion. Anyways, so those are the cartridges that I'm probably going to spin up next season. I'll keep you guys updated on that as I go. But I'm excited to really, break out one of these, one of my 308s out here. And, some of my hunting rifles just, bust rust in terms of like the basic fundamentals. Because it happens, after shooting a 6.5 or shooting a competition for a rifle for a while, I get a little lazy, right? I'm not putting the same pressures I am. And so, when I jump on a 308, it's kind of a rude awakening with regard to like, oh crap, I need to be able to manage recoil better, right? So I'm excited to get back because it's just fun to run a working gun. And what I mean by working is like, a hunting rifle, a law enforcement or a sniper type build, right? Guys that are, running a gun to either take a life or save a life, right? It's fun to be able to, to apply those specific fundamentals to make those impacts. Because like I said, I get lazy when I shoot a lot of competition heavy rifle setups. I've got a huge project over the winter that I'm not going to talk about yet, but I'm excited to share with you guys here in a couple of weeks. I'll share with you guys what I've got going on. But that's pretty much going to be occupied my whole winter, especially with the baby coming. I needed to do something that was going to allow me to stay home. And yeah, I definitely, it's going to be launching in the spring. So if that's what you want to, put in your calendars or put in your head, that's my little drip there. But I'm sure I'll talk about it maybe mid-December of, what I've been working on, what I've been cooking. Yeah, that'll be coming early, or at least first quarter of 2025. I'm also trying to get an email list and start curating some emails from you guys. A lot of you guys have been asking, especially if you guys are missing some of these Whiteboard Wednesdays, or, I've been wanting to push out just like regular emails. I've been working with a friend to kind of get that stood up. So I will let you know as that is up as well. And here's a friendly reminder about Alaska. So I announced 2 podcasts ago, episode 3, that I'm going to be coming to Alaska, or coming out of semi-retirement from instructing to teach in Alaska. That's probably going to be the first class that I teach for the year, and maybe the only class. We'll see. But yeah, going to be working with Accurate Advantage up there. Sarah Salone, she's bringing me up. I'm excited to teach that class. We're going to be teaching 3 classes, and it's going to be a 4-day foundation class. So that's like, think of it as a, fundamentals, or, intro to long range, and then an intro to competition, which is 3 days. Those will both be at the Talkeetna range, and then the advanced competition. I'm still waiting on dates for those. But for my competitive shooters out there that want to take their game to the next level, that class will be aimed toward you guys. So that is, kind of the needs. And then based off of that demand, I'm hoping to make it a yearly thing. But huge shout out to Sarah for allowing me to come back or come up to Alaska to teach back in my old stomping grounds. So I'll remind you guys as signups and registration stands up for that. I won't be teaching by myself. I'll be bringing 2 of my really good friends, my brothers up there, who have the same pedigrees that I do, with regard to being former Scout Sniper instructors. They're, I talked about them, I think, podcast 2, my accountability partners. I love those guys. They inspire me. They're still doing great things for our community, and they keep me honest at the top of my game. They push me to be a better version of myself, not only as a shooter, but as a father, as a significant other, and as a sniper, because they're both still active snipers. More on that later of who they are, which, again, don't want to spill the beans too early, but they'll be helping me with that class. And we're kind of just working behind the scenes of like how we want to run that class, with regard to curriculum and just the resources we want to give the shooters that sign up for that class, to just get you as prepared as you can be for a class like that. Because I know there's a lot of intimidation that happens when you sign up for a class and you don't know what to expect. So hopefully, making sure that your experience as a customer or student is taken care of from the time that you sign up until even after the fact. And then, obviously, more content. I appreciate all the feedback, guys. If there's anything that I cannot ask you enough of, is just at least a comment of like what you want to see, how this benefited from you. It helps the quote unquote algorithm, but also helps me. Sometimes I get in dry spells of like, what kind of content did I want to create, right? And hopefully you guys see that I try to create new and different content with regard to precision rifle shooting that's not been done before, right? Because like there's a lot of stuff out there that's like how to mount your scope, how to zero your rifle, right? From all these different creators, which is fine, right? But like you could only do that video so many times before it's like, figure out like shake your stick at and figure out which one you wanted to pick, because they're all typically right. Okay. If you want me to, mount my scope to see how I do it, I will do that. If it really means that that's something that you guys want to see, but there's already a lot of plethora of videos out there on detail. That's like, for me personally, I wouldn't do anything different. That's great. Okay. I try to do something different with, that hasn't been done before in our industry as creative, for long range, like the virtual whiteboard Wednesday, being able to critique. I haven't seen any other, instructors or creators do that. I enjoy doing that. And so that's what I want to continue to do, is just do something different in our industry to be able to tell the story of long range and educate you guys on that stuff. So, okay. Super long-winded podcast. Looks like I'm right around the 90-minute mark. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of this. I know it's super long-winded, especially with a lot of the thanks and those are important to me. Those are important to me because, maybe the people that are listening to it are that they deserve the recognition because of how I feel they contribute to the sport of precision rifle shooting that we all love. And again, I cannot speak enough. If you're not a competitive shooter, how much I want you to get into competitive shooting. Oh, that's one thing I did not talk about as far as like competing is like, because of the baby on the way, I think I'm going to be taking a step back from competing, at least in the 2-day stuff, just because I'm not sure how the first year is going to go. I'm thinking of essentially competing at the regional level or the 1 days. I think there's value to that because, I know, especially my local series, WPR, it feeds into the PRS, and maybe I can do a little series about that, of like how you would shoot the 1 day stuff to eventually get to regionals. If you do well at regionals, then get an invite to the finale. Because I think that finale next year will be in Pennsylvania at War Rifles, which I've heard nothing but great things about that match. So maybe by that point, I'll have, we'll be hunkered down with the little one, and it'll be good to, get back into the 2 day that way, which is the 2025 PRS finale. But it'd be cool to see the journey of like, if somebody that doesn't have the means to shoot nationally every, all 3 matches, it's like, hey, how they can work their way up from, the local level to, again, the national level. So let me chew on that to see if I can make that work, because I think I could stomach, these 1 days versus 2. So anyways, I really appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate everyone that took the time to come up and introduce himself. It really means a lot. It inspires me and motivates me to continue to do these podcasts, to create content for you guys, because I love it. I love the sport. If you're not a competitive shooter, you're missing out on your next best friend or your best friends. Just jump in, right? With whatever you got. Because I promise you, once you get to that local community of shooters, they're going to take care of you. They're going to, point you in the right direction where you need to go. And yeah, I'm looking forward to already, what next season's going to bring, and already, where the sport is going as a whole, and what's capable in 2024 with a precision rifle. And I hope you guys are able to, not only get precision rifle training value, but like holistic life value out of my new format of podcasts. Because I'm passionate about just being able to share my journey as a father, significant other, as a former sniper that sometimes struggles with imposter syndrome with you guys. So anyways, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Share this with a friend if you want. Drop some comments down below. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember, you have control.